Very happy to see you here in this kind of dreary day, although they are telling me that New Year's is worse than Pennsylvania. It's more rainy, it's only down there. Well, we are happy to have you here, and I am very happy to have my co-curators of the exhibit upstairs, Vernacular to the Master Photography of the Anonymous and the Celebrated. This is Don Laputa. Don is a professor at Kane University and a collector par excellence. You know, he loves to teach, take photograph, and collect. This other good fellow here is Robert. And Robert, I always have problem pronouncing his name. You know, therefore, Joskovich, you know, I mean, always have. But, you know, I mean, you know, that is I got a lot of problems with that pronunciation, you know. Anyway, Robert is a professor, he's a historian and a professor of fine arts, and also a collector par excellence. He loves to collect. And that is how the thing goes. You know, we have, I met Donald while we were working in the exhibition of the sculpture of George Siegel, and we did an exhibition not only of George Siegel, but we did an exhibition of the photograph of Donald, because Donald did something very significant for almost 16, 17 years. He documented George Siegel like nobody else has ever done. In essence, he was George's assistant. Therefore, he was there firsthand, and he was able to get some image and get some stories, you know, like nobody else has ever done. Then, besides the exhibit that we did here, I think in Sumner, we have an exhibit of his work in McGuinness, you know. And then that exhibit did travel, not too long ago, was in Texas, in San Antonio, Texas. And it was a really, really good exhibit. But while doing that, we started talking about our collections. And Don was telling me about his involvement with collecting. And then he introduced me his good friend, Robert. And we start talking and looking at the collection, and we decide, let's do something. And that is always the preface of a project, an exhibition. Let's do something, what we can do. Then we have to start looking and doing some research and figuring out what we're going to do. And somehow I suggest to them, and I don't think it's an original idea, but I say, well, how about to match some of the vernacular with some of the masters? And they like it. They say,
no, it was a good original idea. Nobody's done it before.
well, you know, and that is what, you know, that is how the whole story starts. Then here we are. You know, we have the exhibit. I am very happy, you know, that they like it. You know, I mean, and I am very happy of, you know, our staff here. You know, my real able and great staff. You know, because all these exhibitions can be done in many different ways, but we have done so many exhibits here that we are always make it difficult. We want to do something a little different, and we try hard. And I think that we have been, Jeff and Mark, we have been able to accomplish, and the rest of the staff, you know, Amanda, and Denise, and Pat, and our supervisors upstairs, you know, everybody's involved, because being such a small operation here, we wear different hats and we do a lot of different kind of things. Therefore, we got volunteers also who help us, and we were able, you know, to do it, and we are very pleased. And then now we want to converse, talk about, have the opportunity to have the two of them here, and let's have a conversation. I think that the good thing here would be to converse about the exhibit, and I like to propose I don't know if you saw upstairs, we have 3 or 4 quotes, which actually they are associations and impressions that Donald did. And I would like to use that as a kind of beginning, that way they can start talking and telling you about their work as collectors, their work as an artist, their work as historians, and also, what the exhibit means. I selected one or two, actually four of the questions that I think that they are good to use as a starter, as a beginning of the conversation. And the first one that I would like to start, that way I can shut my mouth and let them talk, will be, if you want to find out what is really on our mind, what is really important in our life, open a family photo album. I like to use that as a study. And before, we start talking about another thing that I want to later on mention is that at the moment is another very big exhibit. I have the beautiful catalog at the National Gallery, and they call it American Snapshot. Actually, that is the official title of the show is the art of American Snapshot, 1888 to 1978. And later on I tell you a little bit why that specific date. But that is something that to a certain extent inspired us and say, oh, let's do it, let's do it here, because we knew that that was cooking, at the National Gallery. Of course, there is no competition. That is a really, really huge exhibit. But let me tell you, a lot of the images that we have here, they are as good or equal to the ones that they have down there, and I am very proud of that and happy. Okay, let's go back to that question, and anyone who wants to start, go ahead.
Want to read that again?
Yeah, I will read that again. And basically, the idea is, if you want to find out what is really in our mind, what is really important in our life, open a family photo album.
Well, I think I'll start by saying that many of the photographs upstairs and in this catalog are from average anonymous family albums. They're snapshots that were taken out of those albums and matted and put in frames and put on the walls here. I think photography is the most democratic of art forms. And before photography, well, I should say that since photography, I guess since 1888,
yeah,
David, you're talking about, the average person could actually engage in actually producing art. And this has been done on such a huge scale. Billions and billions and billions and billions of photographs have been made by absolutely everyone. And it's just incredible. So I think all of these photographs are taken, I think they're all about ourselves, the people who take these photographs. And I think as you put them all together, it becomes an incredible large family album of man. I think it's a snapshot of humanity. I think if you want to, again, find out what's on our minds, you look at our family albums, because these photographs are personal. They're really not made to put in museums or put in books or do any of that. And none of those people who shot any of these pictures upstairs had any idea that they would be at Lehigh University. So they are extremely personal, and they are really about us.
Yeah, there you are.
There's also an amount of kind of sadness to them, that the idea that they were removed and the family no longer exists and we don't know where they are. That gives it a kind of a special pathos to the pictures. There's also the idea that snapshots were documents. You had the operator taking the photograph through the camera, you had somebody posing in front of that camera, and that person or subject would pose accordingly to rules set sometimes by the photographer, or sometimes let loose to do what he or she would like to do. And the camera and the snapshot gave the opportunity to perform, to act out fantasies, to do something silly and irrational that they normally would not do in everyday life. And they could document it as a kind of proof that this was done. The other aspect of the snapshot, because of the nature of photography, was the idea that it proved that this existed sometime in history. With a photograph, this can be done with a drawing. It could pick up some mimetic qualities, but the snapshot documents that moment, that time, and frozen in that time. The family album, as Donald said, is a little treasure. And unfortunately, a lot of these little treasures were broken up and taken out of their traditional form and placed within the museum context. They become something else. Now, what we wanted to see with this exhibition was taking these snapshots or found images or advertising images and comparing them with the vernacular photographers with the masters. Is there a relationship? Is one better than the other? Are they the same? Do they have similar qualities? This is the idea behind the show, as well as was there an influence of vernacular onto modern masters, or vice versa. So from the snapshot, which is kind of the basic rudimentary kind of image anybody can make, up through advertising photography, right up through the masters, is there a little give and take between the two? Are they aware of each other?
One interesting thing that brings when we are talking that we are pairing the master with the vernacular, the anonymous, is that, and I think that don't imply that it's not naive or artistically ignorant. You know, I mean, they were just moments, you know, that, as you say, that they were recorded. They were a specific situation. But some of the photographs are also informed. They are funny, and they have been done, you know, I mean, intentionally funny. They have been manipulated or done. Therefore, that is another aspect. The same way that the master has an idea, and he manipulated, or she manipulated, or they did that. You know, many of us that don't call ourselves photographers do that. But even more, we do that with, especially if we are now addressing the idea of the family albums. As a matter of fact, I read somewhere that if you ask people, and you can actually answer the question yourself, if you ask people, what would you take in a case of a fire in a house? Most people react and they take photographs. And that is already, you know, I mean, right there is the answer of the memory. That is the answer of the importance, you know, I mean, that if you destroy, you know, that photograph disappeared. You know, I mean, a lot of part of your history has disappeared. You know, it's gone. Therefore, that gives another interesting angle to that. As I promised in the beginning, I like this to be a conversation, and I think that my partners here agree with that. Therefore, if you have a question at this moment about that first question that we are dealing with, you know, if you want to find out what is really on our mind, what is really important in our life, open a family album. If you have an anecdote or you want to say something, let's do it right now.
How many of you performed goofy in front of a photograph at one point in your life? All right.
Put your fingers like this, or you know, do something weird. Yeah.
I'm just curious how you went about acquiring all these pieces.
In my case, flea markets. Going back 15, 20 years. I mean, a lot of these things cost a quarter, a dime, $1 at the most. And they had some kind of connection to a modernity that I was aware of through my studies as an art historian. There was this relationship between the quirky, surrealism, modernist aspects of cropping figures off irrationally, and just even sometimes the dullness of the photograph, the ennui, the boredom. Why did somebody take this dead-on, dull picture? It meant something to them. But that meaning, that vernacular iconography is gone now. We don't know why he or she took this picture. And that kind of fascinated me, what went on through the thought process. But today we have digital cameras, and you can make snap after snap after snap. You don't have to worry about film. And right, if you don't like it, delete it, take another picture. So I think things are going to change in terms of the way we make pictures. But when you have film, you have to make a decision. I only have 22 pictures to take on this wall. I have to take them wisely, otherwise it's gone for the day. And so the idea possibly of the theatrics involved by setting up a picture to document, you set aside a certain amount of pictures just for that kind of silliness. Some have a sense of sadness to them as well. The idea of photographing implies, if you ever read Roland Barthes, the idea of once you take a photograph, it's about death. It's going to be frozen in time. You're going to be gone, but the photograph will exist. How will that play over the years? And as I mentioned before, when we go through these boxes and boxes of photographs at the flea market,
A lot.
where did these come from? What family owned these? Why did they get rid of them? And then the other aspect, as I mentioned, because to our eyes, they had something else that the family did not recognize, possibly.
How about you? How do you collect?
Bob and I have actually gone out together looking for photographs together, but also I search eBay too, of course, and I think wonderful vernacular photographs are getting more and more difficult to find. But aside from how I got them, I'm also a photographer, and I also like to collect really classic examples of photography. I mean, really, really wonderful things, I hope. And I look at these snapshots and find the same excitement when I look at some of the snapshots as I do when I look at a Steichen photograph or a Mache or something like that. And I think, one might be thousands of dollars, and this was $1. And they're marvelous. They're just absolutely marvelous pieces of art. And I don't really think that the people who made these photographs, just as I don't think when you make snapshots, I don't think they're naive, and I don't think they were naive either. I think these people lived in a specific time, and they saw images. We're an image-oriented society, and we were that for generations. Photography's been around a long time, and people look at advertisements, people look at movies, and so on and so on, and magazines, and we're influenced by wonderful art and great art too. And I think this influences everything that we do. We're a product of our time. And some of these photographs stand equally next to some of the greatest photographs, I believe. They just don't have the name on them. And that's what excites me about these images. And I don't believe they're naive. I think that they're just wonderful pieces of humanity.
I collect institutionally. Therefore, I collect for a reason, for a collection that has a very specific mission. Our mission is visual literacy. Our mission is to be able to use, hopefully, a lot of that images for teaching or example. This is an example right here in this room. This is a laboratory, a classroom, something that we change occasionally, usually 19 months, but sometimes certain things take us a little longer, and we rotate things, and a lot of the things are projects and involvement of students, and a lot of the installations are professional. But when I collect, it's kind of tricky because we don't have a buying power. It's a very limited buying power. Therefore, I am very, very fortunate. I have a great opportunity to collect in many different ways. I actually trade, bargain, trade. We have very generous artists who I buy an image and give me to. We got collectors who gave us work. There are many, many, many different ways that we have been able to obtain, to actually gather the collection, many, many different ways. We have collectors who give us masses of photographs because they want tax deduction. We got other ones who give it for a very specific reason, in memory of somebody. Therefore, there are so many different ways and means that we have the collection. And another thing that we have established is that the collection, although eclectic in nature, is a teaching collection. Therefore, I am as much interested in the very, very contemporary today expression, even if it's not that value, as well as I am in the, in the early and one-of-a-kind, image of the 19th century. And we have been very fortunate throughout the years. And I am saying throughout the years because I've been doing this, since the mid-70s. And we have been able to gather that. And then having an opportunity to do an exercise, with our collection. As some of you know, some of the images that are upstairs, we are talking about some very, very important names, but they can hold very nicely. And I think that if they were alive or they will see, they will be offended or they will be, mad to see, the kind of, I will call it a exercise, academic exercise. But therefore, collecting institutionally is not that different than collecting, individually or private, because it's an individual who is representing that institutional collection. And of course, it's subjective. There are certain subjectivity on it. But I do it, I do acquire and I do accept some photographs, and I am not crazy about it, but I think that they are very important and they have to be in the collection. There are other ones that I kill for them, I love it, and I think that they are fantastic. But that doesn't happen all the time, therefore it's a balance, collecting, being private or being corporate or institutional, have is in and out. There is no one specific way of doing it, or there is no book that tells you how to collect. I think that is something very, very individual. You create, a very specific goal, and from there you go. Some people collect by accident, and eventually they got a tremendous collection. Some other one collect because of investment, and then that is a different ballgame. If you don't have the money, don't even dare to do it. Because it's a different kind. It's like gambling. You are taking a different kind of chance. There are many, many ways. How about some of you? Why do you collect? Or why do you like collecting? Or can anybody?
Maybe make snapshots.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like vintage photographs, and I collect particularly photographs of men and children. And the idea there is that I want to kind of explore the notion that man, male that is also as nurturing as the female. And so I'd like to see whether that idea can be supported by historical facts. And I use photography as a way to prove or disprove the thesis. And so I started to collect all of those images of just the male and the child, and it proved to be very difficult. Because oftentimes, especially with old photographs, we only see mothers with children. And so that really sparked me.
Taking that one step back.
I'm sorry?
Taking that one step back, in the 19th century, you have pictures of children, babies, sitting on a chair, and the mother's behind them, but the mother is covered up
Yes.
in a cloth or something, or sometimes you just see a hand holding the child in place, and the mother or the parent is absent, and the child's sitting there, which is a very odd notion. If the mother's already there, why not show both?
Yes.
Or why cover the mother up just to have the child sitting there? It's a very odd third quarter 19th century thing that everybody seems to have been doing. There's one example I just acquired where a child is there, the mother has the child on the lap. They cut the mother's head off, so from the neck down she's good. But why show, or why not show the mother? And this is an interesting quality. Another thing, again, in terms of odd things in the third quarter 19th century to the early 20th, is people with their heads conjoined, heads leading into one another, taking their pictures. Why was that? There's also a series of photographs going back as far as I could find, from about 1870 right to about after the First World War, of people sticking their heads through newspapers. And I figure this is a kind of pun, headlines. Sticking them through. But people were doing this. I just acquired a photograph of, it's either 5 or 6 women with a ladder over their bodies and their heads popping through newspapers. And it seems to be at certain times, people do certain things. The zeitgeist must be right for people all over the country to be doing the same thing at the same time. And there could be possibly, in your case, they're just out there and you haven't found them yet. But it's usually the mother and child. It's rare to see the father and child.
It is,
Yeah.
One interesting thing, and that happened to me. I was the firstborn, my God, my father, really used and abused his box camera, taking picture of me. My poor sister, she said, oh, there are not that many of me. They took all you. And that happens a lot. The first child, the firstborn, get a little bit more attention because later on the parents, for whatever reason, they are too tired or whatever. But it's very fascinating, what you are doing. And I know that you are doing this also as a research, a psychology research. And as you are aware, there are a lot of books, both mother and daughters. They even have, I think, one about fathers and sons. But they are, the literature, the photography literature is amazing. It's incredible, the proliferation of that. And I am sure that they are more than one, but at least they are one. But I know that there are quite a few of mothers and daughters.
Yeah, but fathers and sons, I know it's a contemporary book, but to find anything early,
It's hard.
it might be just a division of labor in the house. The father just wouldn't be photographed as a
I don't
child.
know, my guess that if we do find a father and child photographs, most likely the mother died.
Really?
Because during the Victorian
That is a very
period,
interesting
a lot of women died due to childbirth or diseases in
A good point, yes.
Well, that is interesting. Also, there were a time in the 19th century that there were a lot of photographs of dead children.
Yeah, post-mortem
Yeah,
photos.
post-mortem photo, a tremendous amount of that.
And that was considered part of the family. It would be put on the mantelpiece with the other living members of the family.
Yeah.
To our eyes, they're quite eerie. To the 19th century, they were quite acceptable.
Very much so. I remember years ago doing what they do, going through flea markets and that. There were a lot of that pictures.
Sure.
You don't find it anymore.
No, really, it was the 19th century.
Yeah, right. Now you don't find that much at all. That is good. And I like to, I think that we like to hear if anybody else is doing something different with collecting. Yes.
I'm a professional photographer, have been for 19 years.
Uh-huh.
But my view of photography is very vernacular. It's very simple. I take pictures because I want to own and hold that memory.
Uh-huh.
I want that in a physical form to, and in some ways, grant myself and these memories a sense of immortality.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
freeze
correct.
time. And I know that's pretty much verbalizing why most, your average snapshotter takes pictures, not necessarily what a professional artist does, but I'm very naive about that. I know that though. I know that I want to own it and I want to hold it and take possession and freeze time. And whether that's my photographs or photographs of things I want or treasure.
That is very, very interesting, and it's fascinating, if each of us could tell you why we do certain things, that is the beauty of that. And that leads me into the second association and impression. We mentioned something of that, but I got to read it. It's photographs exist because they are part of a human urge to record and preserve our past. But most important, they speak of a universal urge to create. I think that we can address that, but it's more that we might want to say about that specific. And I got to read that once more. Photographs exist because they are part of a human urge to record and preserve our past. But most important, they speak of a universal urge to create.
Well, all I could say about that is it's just my personal belief that human beings are, and I can't prove this, are hardwired, our brains are hardwired to be creative. Probably because we've reached a level of abstraction, abstract thought, so on and so on. And it's a natural thing to be creative. You can go all the way back through history and find objects that were created, and actually beautiful objects that were created by people of all cultures. And I think we continue to do that. And I think that if you're given the means to create something, maybe you could draw, maybe you could paint, but we photograph. And photography is just part of our lives these days. And it's it's like I said before, it's a very democratic art form. And I think because we are predisposed to be creative and we have a camera in our hand, I think we make art. And I think it's only natural. It can't happen any other way. Of course, a lot of people make a lot of stupid pictures, but that's a personal opinion. You know, who am I to decide that that's not good or that's not good? But that's the way it is. And even my students, I don't think things have changed through the decades. I teach digital, and my students come back with 300 photographs, 400 photographs, 500 photographs every week, and there are lots of them. And I look at thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of images, and I see just the most wonderful. I mean, I could have to sort them out, of course. Like, why did you take so many pictures of your daughter? You know, that kind of thing. So many wonderful experimental images. And where did they get that from? It's part of their environment. You know, we react to everything that we see. We react to other photography. I think we're curious. We try different things. We experiment. We just want to see how it looks. We want to see how things look looking down, looking up, doing, again, silly things, as Bob said.
There's also Gary Winogrand, great photographer of the 60s and 70s and 80s. He said he took photographs because he wanted to see what the world looked like photographed. Because when you take a picture, it's really out of context. It's a little tiny piece of paper, black and white or color, now on a CD, if you will. And it's something you could, in terms of a print, something you could hold and bend and flip. And that person or persons or things or objects are on there. And it looks different from the real world. It's a frozen moment. And the time is, each day that image stays the same, but time keeps moving on. So what do we look like photographed? And what happens when somebody aims a camera at you? What do? They start fixing their hair, somebody tells you to say cheese. You take on a persona. Some of the great photographs is, for example, Walker Evans making snaps in the subway to see what people really look like without those airs of persona. Somebody like Cindy Sherman today making photographs to have intentional personas, made up ones, but personas nonetheless, false ones. So what do we look like photographed? It's different than when we look in the mirror or look at each other.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking, to sort of combine what you're talking about collecting. I was fortunate that my family has took a lot of photographs going back to the 19th century. So on the one hand, it's nice to have this collection. It didn't mean much to me when I was younger, but now as I've gotten older, they become much more precious. But it's interesting too, because what you're talking about, these images give me a clear sense of who they were in a visual sense. Plus, in terms of the environment, which all relates directly to my past. There's a direct link, back through these people. But there's also clues to how they look, how they dress, all these things. So it feeds into my thought process of who I am today based on who they were. So the visualization, rather than having to read letters or hear secondhand stories or things like that about your ancestors, there's this visual record.
And you know that had been.
Right, that's very concrete.
Yeah.
You trust that photographs don't lie, so that's the way my great-grandfather.
Above all of them, lie upstairs when you get a chance.
That is so fascinating what you are saying, because I went through the same experience after my parents died, and I look at boxes and boxes of photographs. And actually, was such an enjoyable, thing to do, because I can see the freshness and the thing, how much love they have for us, and how, our life, actually, where I came from, and what do we came from, and what was the idea. That is interesting that you mentioned that, because I have that experience myself. Yes.
I think about it, if you just sort of taking that one step further, we can make up our own stories too.
Yeah.
You say it doesn't lie, but I think we can also make up our
Sure.
own narratives that we want to with those pictures.
Without any doubt.
And we may not have the patience to listen to their stories, but we can make up our own.
But I think that looking at that kind of things, having that kind of experience and influence, make you, be a better storyteller. Make you, actually, because that is what fiction is. And, and it's based on reality. Then we say, oh my God, this is fiction, but that fiction could have been very much, a reality.
I mean, if you look at some of the photos upstairs, individuals, what kind of stories can you write about them?
Yeah.
Not even knowing just by looking at the image. What kind of novel would come out of these people?
Yeah, I was talking to a professor of a freshman composition, and we were talking about this show, and she really liked to use that because she said the amazing thing is that when she asked the students to look at a photograph and tell a story, it's fascinating, and if she got 20 people, it's the only time that she got 20 people in class, everybody tells you something different. But if she tells, a theme, everybody writes the same thing. It's kind of fascinating to see how people do react and look and interpret. And that is a very heavy duty word, interpret, because interpretation in the world that we are living now, have so many angles, can be intellectual interpretation, can be, just physical, just descriptive. It's so many things, and, can be very biased depending, your own preference and so on. Therefore, it's quite complex, to actually, and I deal with that in museum studies, that we look at a photo, not only a photograph, a work of art, period, because photograph is no different than a painting to me, or any other kind of art. And actually, the way that you can interpret that, depends a lot, in the angle, that you are at. Meaning, how you are looking at the image, means a lot. What is the preface of the first introductory word that you gave? All that kind of things, can actually be taken, that they are there. There is a reason for. Even what is happening, the news, the state of the art, all that kind of things influencing how people, look at things and talk about things.
Well, a lot of the photographers, the amateurs, the vernacular pieces upstairs from 20s, 30s, and 40s were also influenced a lot from advertising. They read papers, they looked at magazines. Those people who worked for magazines, made photographs, were also influenced by modernist photographers. So there's this kind of filtering down of modernist sensibilities that eventually drift into the vernacular image.
Yes, a lot of interest on that. Well, let me keep going and go back to another question. Oh, you had a question here? Yes.
Were the images upstairs all just your collections, or did you combine Lehi's?
We combine Lehigh. The pairs
Could
that
you
you
repeat the
have.
question?
What is that?
Could you repeat the question?
She's asking if the images upstairs are from their collection and also from Lehigh, and I am saying yes. The pairs are one from either of them, depending, because you can read Donald Acuda or Robert, they got their initials, their name down there, and usually the masters, although we do have some vernacular photographs in our collection, what we have upstairs is only the masters. And that was the idea.
We looked at them in terms of formal relationships, the poses, the performance of the figures, and there's a relationship there by one, in terms of the masters, of probing a certain idea, and a amateur, quote-unquote amateur, well, it's very sophisticated, making a picture very similar with the same idea, same way of documenting these pictures. And so that you get this wonderful balance between, and this kind of frisson between the two of them.
Yeah.
They work, they don't work, there's this give and take.
Sure. We took a long shot in certain things, because,
they work pretty well.
But they work pretty well. It's a lot of things that you can actually, look at the visual metaphor, the relationship of the ambiance or the subject matter. Like one of the very first images, you got the Murish, the animal, the deer, and then you have a very, very kind of funny situation where you got a little girl who is posing actually for her family, I presume, with a gun, with a rifle, and two dead deers on the hood of the car. And right there, immediately we didn't have to think about it. We knew exactly.
Yeah, so there was no formal relationship.
No formal relationship.
But there was a kind of wonderful interpretive...
cognitive, also a very cognitive kind of reaction to that.
seriousness to kind of a silliness to it.
Silliness to it, yeah. Yes.
Did the picture pictures changed, or did they look different to you when they were now on
Yes.
the wall as opposed to when you?
Yeah, it's always tough because at home we have a few on the wall, most of them are in a box
Yeah.
someplace. And it looks fabulous, it really does, because now they can breathe up there and they look, and they did an unbelievable job
What?
installing it. And yeah, it's a great joy to see them up on the
Yeah,
walls.
that is a great question, because one of the things that we struggled, Jeff, Mark and I, we were talking about a lot of these photographs are family albums. They were not made to be owned, and here we are hanging them.
We're removing them
You
from
know,
their
right?
context.
You know what I mean? Getting that from the context, and you could feel it, you could tell. But we tried to justify that, because of the group, because of the whole. We feel that what we have upstairs is not just an exhibition of vernacular master; it's an installation.
Yeah.
We have to think of the overall thing as an installation, and that is how we were able to overcome that. But that was one of our conversations. Also, how do you really start matching or trying to get one picture talking to the other one? That is also very difficult. This kind of, to create a kind of a visual dialogue. That is also very difficult. We went through all of that. Maybe they want to say something about it. We went through all of that. A lot of that. Just installing, actually designing, the exhibition.
Yes,
Yeah.
To answer your question, as far as I'm concerned, the photographs that I had at home that are here look the same to me. I like the idea of holding them in my hands and the personal nature of those family photographs, those family album photographs. Here I see the same thing, except the only difference to me is now they look more expensive.
And they will be after the show.
Will they go back? Will they come out of the frames and go back in the
Well, I'll
collection, or-
keep them matted and they'll be out of the frames. You can't store things in frames. But I have hundreds more, so I'm not missing them.
We, in collections, we don't keep things frames for too long, because the glass or the plexiglass, that indeed can be harmful depending where you have it. One of the worst enemy of any work of art is light, and that is very, very specific, as you all know here, in photography, even more so. And in some of this kind of material, because some of the materials automatically, they kind of extinguish themselves, because you don't know what kind of material, what kind of washing, what kind of clean, It's a very, very difficult kind of thing, and we have to try to keep them the best that we can, because it's not really an answer to how long they will last.
The most irrational thing upstairs is when you get a chance in the slide room. We have, was it 80? 80 slides, some from my family, some from Donald, some found, and there's no rhyme or reason to them. They just go around, and they're wonderful. They're mostly from late 50s to early 70s, I guess.
Yes.
About 15-year period.
And
And,
Ectochrome and Kodachrome slides.
yeah.
And one of the things that I love about that room is that we just want to be just a projection. And as a matter of fact, if you read the label, that machine down there is a 1974 projector. Not too many of them are around anymore. It's a vintage one. And that is the idea, we are not just showing these slides, we are showing the whole idea of Ectochrome, Kodachrome. They have a different kind of life. They got a different kind of you look at them and they, you have to read them different. They speak to you. They talk to you in a very different way than many other, than a C print or, many other one, or color, a digital photography today. There is something about the color. Of course, we are talking about the 60s or the 70s, automatically, the way you dress and, and many different kind of things, they look automatically funky to you now. You say, oh my God, that is all fun. Oh my God, look at my hair. But besides that, beyond that kind of a anthropological, kind of a description, there is something very natural about that each period that the photograph actually. Some of them don't, because, for example, the image that I got right here behind me, that one right here, that happened to be a 1930 or 1950 photograph, and that was from a magazine photograph, and you look at that color, and it's a total different kind, but that is a quadricomia, how they call it, portrait. Therefore, there are 4 colors to be able to make that. It's very different to do that. The photographers used to get their fingernails really, really in bad shape, in the dark room doing that kind of printing.
In the slides, though, it's limited. You got, what do we have, 8 seconds on there?
Yes, we got 8
And
seconds.
so it's fast looking, kind of slow read kind
Yeah.
of picture.
Yeah.
And so it's hitting you quick. Then you're off to another one. So there's this wonderful element of time, breaking it up from period to period to image to image. You'll see when you go upstairs. It's really wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, we decide that is very, I am happy that he mentioned that because the timing to me is very important. Like what is happening here, you got 30 seconds. And sometimes it's eternal, the image down there, sometimes go real fast. And the one upstairs is 8 seconds. I can swear that some of the images there, I was able to enjoy it as much as I enjoyed when we were, Mark and I were testing because we start with 45 seconds and say that is too fast, you know. I mean, then we went to 30 seconds. But timing, I think, is is very, very important. You know, like when Ulrich was doing his experiment, later on leading to the cinematography, and you know how frames and how things move. You know, all that kind of things have a lot to do, influence a lot. You know, the life and the make of a photograph.
Well, also as part of the process at home, we took out the slide projector and we lasted about 5 seconds.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Went on to the other one.
Yeah, right, exactly. And also, if you keep it for too long, you burn the heck out of that because, you know, that is one thing that we have upstairs now. We have a little clock, a time clock, because if we cannot keep the machine more than what, Mark, 45 minutes?
We're working on with 45 minutes right
Yeah.
now. So.
Yeah, otherwise we are jeopardizing taking chance to really burn the gelatin.
Yeah.
You know, and also we will be using a lot of lamps. It's a lot of little details like that that make fascinating and make exhibitions a little bit more complicated because the concept is easy. It's how to make it. You know, I mean, it's the details who do that. Any other question before I move into any other comments? Yes.
Are you planning on making any part of this collection available on the web?
We have it.
Digital.
Yeah, we have it.
Yeah, there are a few selections are available on the
28, I think,
website, luag.org. It's not the whole show, but
28 pictures.
And so it'll be there for an extended period of time?
Well, we usually go to an archive. Yeah, we might even put more images later on, but that is how. Well, he's the webmaster. He can tell you more than me about it.
What do we have, about 20?
20, yeah. Yeah, that we are trying, and one thing that this is separate from what we are talking now, we are doing more and more virtual exhibitions. We are doing next semester, next year, we will be starting with a few actual virtual, just as a virtual exhibit. We are doing more and more. And we are doing some also for the web, and we will transfer that to the web. And we are learning along the way, how to make it more effective. And we like it. And it's nothing new, as everybody have it. Look at YouTube and all that. You got all kinds of movies and things, and it's amazing the proliferation of that. But I am having a lot of fun curating electronic exhibit. I am having a lot of fun. Although I am more a three-dimensional kind of person, dealing with that. It's a fascinating kind of approach to how to put it out. Okay, I'm going to jump into the question here that says the great magnetic attraction of photography is that can be used for whatever purpose one wishes.
Well, that's a general statement about art in general. Art can be used for whatever purpose one wishes. That's the way it is. It's a personal expression. And not only that, I think the expression it's about you, the artist who actually, has that pencil in their hand or camera in their hand. It becomes all of this is a self-portrait, really, of the person who actually makes the image. Basically, that's my personal belief about that. What else can I say? I tell my students that if your photographs are really great, if you really, really great, and you're honest about what you do, you could take your portfolio and send it to your therapist instead of going yourself.
That's a new one. Starting a new trend there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's save a lot of time.
That is a funny one. Any reactions toward that? You want to address that, Bob? Or maybe somebody? Yeah?
What are your response?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that he started me right. Because
Yeah.
it's like you look at African art, actually it was a functional art that
Sure.
now we call it art. But at the time that was made, it wasn't art. Was part of the,
We
of the
appropriated that.
You appropriated that. A lot of photographs, they were done for certain reasons, scientific things and all that, and we appropriated them. They are art now.
But I think culture comes into that too.
Of course,
Culture, religion, personal feelings, emotions.
Yeah.
If you're anxious that day, you take anxious pictures. It depends on your personal reasons.
Oh, no doubt about that. But the multi, purpose, what we are talking here, whatever you wish is actually, part of that, because there are so many, things. And also there are certain images that work better a certain way than the other one, because they were meant to do certain kind of things, to create a certain kind of mood, to tell a certain kind of thing. It's like voice, different voices can tell you different kind of things. Therefore, it's a lot of ways to look at this.
I was just going to say, on the vernacular level, these were not meant as art. These are meant for family, a few friends, and that was it. To reflect back, to laugh at, to remember when. And we've appropriated that, just like you mentioned with the African art, into a higher form. Because of the way we look at the world, because of the inundation of visual language of everything, where it's visual glut now. And the way the photographs take us back to a quieter time. You have to approach it. It's not an enormous painting where you have to stand back. You have to go up to the photograph to look at it. And I think that's a bit different than other forms of art.
That was another factor when we were, looking at building the exhibition, actually designing the exhibition. The difference between one side, of the images compared to the master, or vice versa, that make it different. And then the way that we put them together, how we parallel them or place them, that was also a different kind of phenomenon that we have to keep in mind. How to create the traffic pattern, how to circulate them, how to put them. Because some of them, they have a different kind of reading depending how you look at them. The same way with the back wall, where we decide what color we want to put on the back. What was the color, when one of the things that we try to do here is pretty much the catalog and the exhibition is designed at the same time. We think that one can supplement the other one, or vice versa. One fits the other one. And that was one of the things that we were talking, because we have so many, sometimes you look at everything look brown, other times you look at it look greenish, there's so many different kind of feelings, and so many different kind of reactions that you got by some of these photographs. And some of them, they were done as a black and white, but they are not anymore black and white, because of the chemistry and the time and all that. They are all gone by and they have changed dramatically.
And like a sculpture as a patina, these photographs change with time. They're on paper, they age. Not unlike us.
Not like us. Any comments about that one, or should I jump into another? Yes, yes.
I've got a question related to something that we just talked about a little bit earlier. Don was talking a little bit about that the notion that these vernacular photographers were not necessarily naive and unaware of trends in photography, visual images. And I'm not sure if you can answer this question relatively quickly or not, but with the sort of the flattening of the playing field with this technology and the influence that we're getting into with non-artistic photographers or vernacular photographers being influenced by visual culture and vice versa, where do you see the line being drawn as to whether a photograph is art or is not
art? I think a photograph is art if that's what you say it is.
So it's the
I'm not really trying to be flip about this whole thing, you know? I think that,
It's very Duchamp.
if I take it and I say it's art, it's art. Whether you accept it as good art or not, that's another issue. You might think it's horrible, or you might think it's the greatest thing on earth. That's it. I don't. All I know is photography is art. That's been settled a really long time ago by Stiglitz and other people. I think it's the intent of what it's for. But I could still take a photograph that was made decades ago by somebody else and claim it's art, I suppose, because it affects me in a certain way. It does something to me. It makes me feel emotionally, right? Exactly. And maybe as time goes by, obviously things change. Maybe the photograph has more meaning because of history and passage of time. So I don't know. I go into a lot of galleries. Going to an opening in New York tomorrow, and I'm sure I'm going to see photographs that I don't think is art, that are art on that wall, and I'm probably going to say, "My God, how did that thing get there?"
Well, it's the old proverb, that what is garbage for some people is art for others, and vice versa. And therefore, it depends, how do you actually,
What you bring to the work.
what you bring to the work and how you establish that. Like anything else in life, we got boundaries. You have certain limitations, otherwise it's open, and you will get a lot of different, you will get nowhere. Then if you feel that something is art and that is your position, you got the right to disagree. And I think that we are seeing that constantly in the world. But interesting enough, and I remember that going in the 70s, in 74, 73, in New York City with Nathan Lyons and many of the people, who really worked very hard to make photography art, because a lot of the big museums, with some very big exceptions, and you know who they are, the MoMA, and all of them, they didn't take photography serious as an art. And a lot of, it took a long time, Sure, we are now in 2007, we are in the 21st century, but there are people who still argue that, they don't see it, therefore that will be an eternal, endless kind of a saga,
The one who brought it to the forefront, though, at that moment was John Sarkovsky in 1962-63, where he brought in images of young photographers, who worked in a very vernacular-like style, and he put them together and saw a relationship between this kind of naturalness. Because of a camera, you could all push a button and name a camera, and certain things happen, you automatically set up a composition, and he saw the relationship between the serious artist and the things that he would find here and there, flea markets and whatnot.
But even before that, with the History of Man exhibit, even before that, there were already some very, very serious intentions or serious desires of, questioning, the art and seeing it from different angles.
But it also brings up an interesting point. It's one thing to be a piece of art, and it's another thing to be an artist. And I think that I could take, some photographs from a family album and say that's a piece of art. But was that person an artist? I think being an artist is more of a conceptual idea. You have to have some purpose behind what you do. And there's supposed to be an idea behind your vision. You have to have a vision. Sorry,
Yeah.
there's a question.
I've always felt very uncomfortable with that discussion, whether photography is art. As a photographer, I've always said, that question, are you an artist? And I say, I'm a photographer, and I don't care. Because that discussion, we call any one of these, Walker Evans or the baby picture art, it feels like at the end of the discussion, okay, we validated it's art. Whereas photography, for me, is more about communication. When you say, well, this is a piece of communication, you're elevating that communication. By taking this vernacular work and putting it on the wall, you're magnifying its possibilities. But communication is open-ended. It continues, whereas it feels like that art discussion, once we validated something as art or not art.
You have Thomas Ruff and other people make these enormously scaled photographs, and they don't consider themselves photographers. They consider themselves artists who use photography just as an artist would use paint or welded steel or whatever. It's just a way of making their picture. So I think the lines have really been blurred. What is photography? What is art? Well, it's come together, I think.
Yeah, an art school, for example, today, they train you as a visual communicator, as a visual artist. If you feel that the piece that you want to do, would be better in ceramics than in photograph, do it in ceramics. It's an expression and you're communicating anyway. Therefore, I understand what you're saying, and that is a kind of an end of a conversation, but we shouldn't let it be an end of conversation, because as long as we can communicate, who cares if you call yourself an artist or photographer, as long as you can communicate and enjoy that. I see the point, but that is what a curator, I decided that to me, I couldn't, because if I call somebody just photographer, they say, I am an artist, I am not a photographer. If I call somebody a photographer, an artist, I say, I am a photographer, not an artist. Then I solve that problem by a slash,
I think it's simple. You're an artist, your medium is photography.
Exactly.
That's it.
I mean, it poses all kinds of questions.
Sure.
When you talk about art, you talk about pottery, painting, sculpture, whatever, you throw photography in there, and it's so much, the room got so much bigger and so much different. If you're a potter, that's your art, it's much different than this. Not saying that it doesn't belong here, but...
Well, photography is one of the most popular art forms in the world. And in New York, this is the center of this metropolitan area is the center of photography. This is the photography world in this tri-state area.
Yeah.
So many more people are involved in photography because it's accessible. Not everybody has a kiln and a wheel to make ceramics and this and that.
And look at the decisions that some museums are making. What areas to emphasize. And I am talking from Miguel to San Francisco, they are going to photography. Everybody's going to photography. And here is again an argument that somebody, but all depends how you put it. This time
they're playing catch-up.
they are playing catch-up with that. And that is something that, but let me, I always like to, might sound a little ridiculous, but I always like to quote, Picasso when they ask him what is art. And do you know the answer? His answer was, what is it? And that is what it is, what is, if it's art for you, that is fine. And I think that as long as we communicate that idea, either that isn't or is, I think that is great. I think that we are getting, ahead. And in the world that we are having right now, sometimes you wonder, but some people call them photographer, and you say, why? But they are calling themselves photographer. You have to respect that idea. Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Or comments? Yeah.
I have the question. Is there bad art?
Sure.
And what implications does that have for our understanding of art?
Well, can I, and I am not trying to be facetious, but can I throw that back to you, and can I say, is that evil and good? And you have to say, yes, there is evil, there is good. Of course there are good art and bad art. All depends how you see it. How do you actually, what is your take or position on that? I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I think there is art, sort of good art and bad art. I think there is art that I like and art that I don't like. Why should I say it's bad? I mean, it just, if I don't, if I don't like, I
That's worse thing.
I was very adamant about the fact that I didn't like it. But I'm trying to be fair.
Well, I'm reacting to the fact that this whole notion of appropriating and making something art, it's like...
Well, we've been doing that for a long time. You mean raising something up to the level of art?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
it was just mentioned by Bob.
It's sort of divorcing it from its intent.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, but
what,
even-
what does that have to do with our concept
Well,
of
but-
what art is?
But we have to,
Concept changes.
but we have to go back, you know, I mean, to the early 18th century was the camera lucida. You know, a lot of the painters that you think that they, you know, they only were painters, they were actually taking photographs. They were copying from nature with a, you know, a lens.
But does that diminish from the art?
No at all, no whatsoever. But they were doing it, and I am talking about, you know, I mean, the early 18th century they were doing that, you know, at the very beginning of the modernism.
And even in the 20th century, go to MoMA's design floor, fourth floor. They'll have a thing of Tupperware or a lounge chair. And again, taken out of context, your Tupperware that you have in your cupboard, you put it in a museum setting, it looks different. It's the whole Duchamp idea, Champion idea, that if you take something out of context, you'll see it differently. If you take this microphone and stick it upstairs in the gallery and put a floodlight on it, you're going to notice things you never noticed about it before.
But isn't that about intent in terms of design and function and having achieved a level of art in terms of...
The mixing of function and aesthetics, yeah.
Well, if you got that, you know, if you want to have a Victorian attitude, so you know, about 13th century, that is fine, and it's very, very beautiful. Nothing wrong with that. But is the premise where you are looking, you know, how you are actually placing that? You know, there is no argument. But the argument is that is bad art? Yes, there are. But what is bad for me might not be bad for you. You know, we might coincide and say, oh my God, let's keep walking, you know, it's awful. But we might can say, you know, I might say, that is awful, and you say, oh, hold it, that is very interesting because of this and that. I have seen that happen all the time.
Yeah, well, Susan Sontag, she said, ultimately the world is an aesthetic experience. So if you put your eyes and mind in a certain frame, things can be beautiful, or be ugly, depending on how you're looking at whatever object or thing or anything that you're looking at can change depending on your mindset. It can be good one day. Or
Yeah, go ahead.
The idea of raising something to the level of art, like a snapshot, you were saying, oh, let me read this little paragraph here. It says, the idea of selecting a photograph like an anonymous snapshot that was not intended as art could be problematic to some. But the history of art is full of such examples. African art, Chinese ceramics, and many examples of folk art that were made for ritual, religious, or utilitarian purposes. We consider many of these objects as important art, and they adorn the galleries of the world's great museums. The purpose for which it was made does not preclude it from being worthy of being admired as a work of art. That's just what Paul
No, that is a very good point. You see, we are looking right there at a Chinese funerary spot, which is over 2,000 years old.
And they're all meant to be buried.
And they all meant to be buried, you know, here they are. And the reason that they are in such a good shape is because they were buried. You know, they won't last as long, you know, I mean, now when they are out like they were before, you know, that. Yeah. He said, yeah.
Sontag also said that just by the virtue of something surviving for a long period of time, it's going to become art, whether
Sure.
independent of its original purpose.
Yeah.
But I was thinking in the beginning of the discussion, you were talking about the personal nature of these private, you know, family photo albums. So what's your take on the current digital trend towards sharing to the world all of our images? I'm thinking of things like Flickr, which has become the world's photo album.
Yeah.
And what's your take on that?
I see it as ephemeral, that it's there one day, it'll be gone the next. It's not there permanently. And so like a slide going around and around, you have to catch it at one moment, and because it could be gone the next day.
But isn't it also like a giant family album?
Well, exactly. So they're combining digital technology makes possible with social networking.
That's right.
Yeah, that
Which
is, yeah.
it's just like you know, quantum leap from the private family album.
Yeah,
You know, it's
absolutely.
everywhere.
There's a public family album, the family album of humanity.
But then what do you do with the images? Do you save them on the disk, or are they shown on the screen?
Well, one of the big concerns that a lot of the curators of photography, and I belong to this group, to Oracle, we've been discussing what will happen, how do you actually collect web pages? How do you go to collect web? That is one of the things that we are starting to seriously think about it. Because everything, the way, I remember yesterday in a meeting about new curriculum and things like that, one thing that we have to put across the discipline is a web page, for anything, to just to store your own, any student, their own portfolio, their own photograph. The web is the only way to do it. Because otherwise it's obsolete and will become very problematic. Yes.
So just to give you an idea of the scale that's involved here, if you go on to Flickr, you log on the opening page, it will say something like 6,325 pictures uploaded in the last second.
Yes, it's scary.
More visual ones.
Yeah, it's scary. It's really, really scary. It's really, really scary because we have such a bombardment that we are missing a lot. Because, the human eye is very limited, as we all know. And therefore, that kind of bombardment is not contributing to anything positive, but will touch somebody, or will do something. And I think that is also like a fact, something that will be there for a while, might lose come back, All depends on, the perspective that you want to look at it, yes.
But also with programs like Facebook, a lot of students that are my age and college students and people that are using them don't read the terms and agreements. And if
really?
Yeah, because it's pages and pages, and you just want to get going and start networking. But if you do read them, one of the statements it makes is that any photographs or anything that you upload on there becomes their property. And I'm interested to see what's going to start happening with that, because I've even known that people don't get jobs because employers go on and they have a picture that has someone doing something inappropriate. So
It's a big problem.
It's a big problem. That is a very interesting point, and that is becoming in copyright law now. It's becoming a nightmare. A really, really nightmare. It's exactly what we were talking about, the numbers, the incredible amount of things. But of course, like anything else, those ones who apply the law, they apply, a trick to it, and they figure out a way how to, to do it in a different way. But you're right, that is becoming a very, very serious.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of digital photography that you post on the web is moving more towards surveillance than sharing or capturing a memory. It's being manipulated in a different way.
It's voyeurism in a broad scale.
Right.
Yes.
I've used technology for a long time and taught. And I think as I observe all the different progressions that we've gone through, I think we really lost something, and it's the tactile. Because there's a very intimate experience in holding a photograph that you don't get by looking at a photograph on the screen. And
the same thing with writing letters.
Yeah, and the amount of resolution and all of the little fine detail that when you scan it, you lose it. And you don't see it at the 72 dpi. And yes, I can understand the broadness, but there's no way I can look at 6,325 images in a second.
Yeah.
And I've lost something there. And I think that perhaps adds to the pathos that we see with these, because it's not continuing.
Yeah. It's like a good gem, always will hold. If you get the quality of something, that is what people say, is wet photography dead? No. I don't think so. You won't have as many as before. But I don't think that is far away from being dead, because they are not just photographs now. They become poetry. They become something else. They become archival. They become document. They become so many different kind of things. Therefore, the quality, of something, the concept, that signify a lot and means a lot to the specific thing. Yes,
Just the one thing too that a colleague of mine mentioned was the silver process. Anyway, it's good when you look at any silver print negative. There's there's a direct physical link to the moment that the shutter was clicked. Photons of light created the negative at that moment. And then to create the current, you put light back through it. So there's this, you say, physical connection. There's no digestion or homogenation or whatever through a computer processing chip. It's just boom, boom, light on the silver window. So it's, in a sense, a direct link right back to that moment when the photographer put the shutter. So kind of the neat thing about silver process here, or anything that is part of that moment in time as a process sent out through the web.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and there are certain things that doesn't make any difference. If you send to the web, they are not the same thing. Look at an album print, or look at the certain things, you have to look at the physical kind of thing. It doesn't make any difference how good or how incredible it is. They are telling you this is an album. But it's a big difference between this is an album and this is an album photograph that you have in front of you. If you are, if you are interested in that kind of situation. Yes.
Yeah, it seems to me another thing that's lost in the digital world that we live in, for want of a non-cliche term, but is the notion of the process that the artist goes through too. With photography, you've got, shooting 35mm film, you had a contact sheet. You had to choose, then you had to choose, as you mentioned before, with a digital camera, it take however many images I can take, and I just on the spot delete the ones I don't want. This one's a little bit off in the writing process with a typewriter. You've got preliminary drafts, an artist has preliminary sketches. Now the work, we perceive the work as sort of fully formed, and it seems that I don't know. I'm just curious about your take on that. But what's lost is the steps that
but it's getting
artist
more
went through.
it's getting more complicated than that, and maybe Don can talk more than me. Now the digital photography is becoming a quite complex science, and it's a tremendous amount of chemistry, and it's a tremendous amount of papers and a lot of different kind of things that are part of that equation. I know what you're saying, and if you look lightly, that makes a lot of sense, but it's changing. Now the new literature that you have in digital photography is talking about things that we never thought, before when we were talking about analog and, and black and white. You're talking about two very different arts. It's like, you can be a great violinist or be a great singer, They are two very different instruments, and they have different kind of things. No, I will say, I know what you're saying, but I don't think that...
Well, I'm saying the record of the creative process is lost.
But there is a record. There is a record because depends how will be the final, print or the final resolution of a digital. You have to go through a lot of steps. Even for printing, today, if you want to duplicate or printing, it's amazing, it's so many different kind of things. Are you using color? Are you going to dual tones? It's so many different angles. I know what you're saying, but I don't think that this is that easy, I think that it's getting more complicated.
Yeah, I think the choices are hard now. Yeah. As hard with a digital camera. Like I say, you can snap off 1,000, and just by shooting 100 even, you can pick out 2 or 3 minutes just by chance. You have an unlimited way of making pictures. You can never stop. You can put a new battery in, a new card, keep on going. Film, you have to think about. Again, you have a limited amount of film in your camera, and you're going to use it. You have one shot left.
Oh yeah, but there were photographers who used 9 rolls, for a job. Always have been that kind of thing.
This is easy. This is easy. This is too easy in a way. This is not the way.
Well, I personally don't see really the difference, because ultimately, whether the artist is using an analog method, the only reason why there's a record of the steps that they took is because the artist or the photographer chose to value those steps and keep them, because negatives can be destroyed, prints can be destroyed, and the same thing with when you're dealing with digital photography, I mean, all the steps and all the process can be saved in one form or another if whoever's doing it means that it's...
I think the bottom line is your eye good, whether you're using analog or digital. You know,
Yeah, it's your selection.
It's
your
your selection.
I mean, your
Your
editing
editing.
selection, your editing. Everything is becoming a more and more critical thing. Always have been, but now it's more than anything else. Yeah.
As far as this digital and film thing is concerned, I could show you a color print that was made on regular chemical paper like Fuji Crystal Archive that was done from a negative or from a digital image, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. There's no difference. There can be no difference if you know what you're doing, because you can print on the same materials now with digital, from digital files. You can print on Cibachrome, you can print on colored paper, you can print on even double weight fiber-based black and white paper from digital images. That's possible. Everything is possible. You can make snapshots, you can do anything that you want.
I think what the woman over here said before, the idea of actually holding something in her hand.
Sure, still do that.
Yeah, but also the same thing with letter writing. Who writes letters? Everybody's emailing it, deleting it. That kind of thing is gone. The record is gone.
And look at the industrial quality. Go to, right in New York City, look at the, in the square, Times Square. The quality of the images in some of the projections that they are giving is almost unreal. The quality, and that is ephemeral, a lot of that thing, but although they come from disc and things like that. Therefore, there is, it's a very interesting, and we could keep going forever, but it depends, the selection, the choices that you make. I would say that always have been, it's up to the artist, up to the individual. I want to thank, my co-curators and friends, and I want to thank you. Do you have any other question, or should we finish? Okay.